Hello, welcome back and thank you for watching the Betrayed Husbands Club. We appreciate each and every one of you. We'd like to know, what part of the world are you watching us from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1: The Call. Tom Walker stood in his kitchen, grimacing at the bitter taste of coffee that had been ruined by overcooking. His usual morning routine had been thrown off by a distracted mind, resulting in the burnt cup he now held. At 45, his weathered face reflected years of hard work under the sun, where he had run construction sites with a steady hand. His dark hair showed some gray at the temples, but his piercing blue eyes remained sharp, a leftover trait from his military days that continued to serve him well in his civilian life. He reached for the newspaper, appreciating these rare moments of quiet before heading out to the construction site. The kitchen, simple and no-nonsense, mirrored his approach to life, functional, neat, and maintained with the same discipline he applied to everything else. As a construction foreman, Tom didn't make a fortune, but his salary provided a comfortable life for his wife, Eleanor, and their 21-year-old daughter, Ava. Suddenly, the sharp ring of his phone shattered the silence. Tom froze, his hand still hovering over his coffee cup. An unknown number flashed on the screen. "Mr. Walker?" a detached, clinical voice said. "This is Memorial Hospital. Your daughter, Ava, has been admitted to our emergency department." Tom's grip tightened on the phone. "What happened?" "Sir, we can't give specifics over the phone, but you need to come immediately." "I'm on my way." His voice remained steady, though his heart was racing. He grabbed his jacket, leaving his half-eaten breakfast on the counter, and rushed out the door. His boots thudded heavily against the kitchen floor as he hurried to the truck. The old engine sputtered to life, and he drove out of the driveway with purpose. The harsh glare of the hospital's fluorescent lights hit him as he stormed into the emergency department. A nurse directed him toward a curtained area, and Tom's military training kicked in. He scanned the scene quickly. Ava was lying on the bed, her face bruised and swollen. Her right eye was nearly shut, tears streaking down her cheeks. Her hands trembled as she clutched the thin hospital blanket. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tom moved quickly to her side, taking her hand in his. His touch was soft, though his insides churned with growing rage. "I'm here, baby girl. Tell me what happened." Through broken sobs, Ava managed to speak. "I came home early from Sarah's. I heard noises upstairs. She squeezed her eyes shut. "In your bedroom." Tom's jaw tightened. "Go on." "Mom was there," Ava whispered. "With Uncle Rick." The words landed like a physical blow. "Rick," Tom muttered, barely able to process the thought of his wife, Eleanor, with her own brother. Ava continued, her voice barely audible. "I screamed, then these two men came out of nowhere. Rick's bodyguards." She shuddered. "They grabbed me, threw me down the stairs." She broke down into sobs again. "They're still there, Dad. Drinking your whiskey? Laughing." Tom stood up, his movements controlled, deliberate. "Did you see a doctor yet?" "They're waiting for X-rays." "Good." He kissed her forehead. "I'll be back soon." "Dad?" Ava clutched his wrist. "Don't do anything stupid." Tom gave her a cold, tight-lipped smile. "Nothing stupid. Just necessary." He made his way to the nurse's station with measured steps, his mind focused. "My daughter. Ava Walker. I need to know her injuries." The nurse typed quickly on her computer. "Contusions. Possible concussion. Pending X-rays for her ribs and right wrist. The doctor has ordered pain medication." Tom didn't wait. "I want all the documentation." The nurse hesitated. "Sir, that's not standard procedure." "Make it happen." His voice dropped, low and intense. "Those bastards aren't getting away with this." She studied his face for a moment before nodding. "I'll see what I can do." As she turned away, Tom's mind raced. Eleanor. His wife of 23 years. Betraying him, with her own brother. Rick. The man who had always shown up at family dinners with expensive wines and a silver tongue. Tom had always suspected there was something off about him, too smooth, too polished, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. Rick's business dealings had always seemed shady. Too much money with too few questions answered. But bodyguards? That meant something bigger was at play. Rick had muscle behind him now, men who would hurt a young woman to cover up whatever twisted situation he was involved in. Tom pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Mac? It's Walker. Remember that favor from Kandahar? He paused. I'm calling it in. I need everything you can find on Richard Thorne's business. And I mean everything. He ended the call and stared at the emergency room doors, his thoughts swirling. 23 years of marriage. Countless family dinners. Shared holidays. Everything he had built, shattered in an instant. All a lie. The betrayal cut through him, but it wasn't the affair that ignited his fury, it was Ava. His daughter. His child. They had crossed a line that no father could ever overlook. Tom walked back to Ava's bedside. She had finally fallen into an uneasy sleep, the pain medication starting to take effect. He stared at her bruised face, memories flooding back to the day she was born. He had promised then to protect her from any harm. Today, he had failed. But he swore he wouldn't fail again. A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. Mr. Walker, we need to discuss your daughter's injuries. Give me a minute. Tom replied without looking up from Ava. He stepped away from her side and dialed another number. The line rang twice before a voice answered. Detective Ramirez? This is Thomas Walker. We need to talk about Richard Thorne and his associates. He listened for a moment. No, not at the station. Somewhere private. This goes deeper than you think. Tom ended the call and returned to Ava's bedside. The doctor was waiting patiently. Tell me everything, Tom said, his voice calm, but his mind already seething. I want to know exactly what they did to my little girl. As the doctor listed Ava's injuries, Tom's rage began to harden, settling into something cold and unyielding. Eleanor. Rick. The bodyguards. They had thought they were untouchable, that they could hurt his family and laugh about it later, over his whiskey. They were wrong. They had no idea what kind of man they were dealing with. But they would learn. Tom would make sure of it. He sank into the chair beside Ava's bed, his mind already working out what needed to happen next. First, secure Ava. Then gather intel. And then, they would understand the mistake they had made. The mistake of betraying Thomas Walker. The mistake of hurting his daughter. The mistake of thinking they could get away with it. Chapter 2. The Confrontation. Tom's truck crawled down the street, his trained eyes scanning for anything out of place. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows were parked in his driveway. Professional muscle, trying to blend in with the working-class neighborhood. Amateur hour. He parked a block away and approached on foot, years of military training taking over. The front door was ajar, spilling light onto the porch. The faint sound of music, followed by raucous laughter, drifted out. Tom slipped in through the side door, moving silently through his own home like an intruder. The booming bass of the sound system drowned out the sound of his footsteps. The smell of cigarette smoke hit him. He never allowed smoking inside. Voices carried from the living room. A man's laughter, deep and arrogant. Rick's voice. You should have seen his face when I showed up at Christmas dinner. Thanks for the wine, Rick. What a clueless bastard. More laughter followed, and Eleanor's voice joined in, slurred from alcohol. He never suspected a thing. Too busy with his precious routine. Coffee at 6, news at 6:15. Tom's hands balled into fists. 23 years of marriage, reduced to a joke for her brother's amusement. He stepped into the doorway, the scene burning itself into his mind. Eleanor was sprawled on the couch, a drink in hand, her blouse half unbuttoned. Rick was lounging beside her, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. 2 men in black suits stood by the windows, trying to look professional but failing miserably with beers in hand. Get out. Tom's voice cut through the music, and the room froze. Eleanor's drink slipped from her fingers, spilling onto the carpet. Rick's smirk faltered. Well, well, Rick drawled, but his eyes immediately flicked toward his bodyguards. The man of the house returns. 5 seconds, Tom said, his voice cold. Then I start removing you. The first bodyguard, young and muscled, stepped forward. Listen, buddy. Tom moved. Years of combat training exploded into action. His first strike crushed the man's larynx. As the bodyguard gasped, clutching his throat, Tom's knee drove into his solar plexus. The man crumpled, gasping for breath. The second guard reached for a weapon. Tom caught his arm, twisting until bones cracked. The guard screamed as Tom slammed his head into the wall. Once. Twice. The man slumped, unconscious. 15 seconds. 2 threats neutralized. Rick stumbled backward, yanking Eleanor with him. Now, Tom, let's be reasonable. Reasonable? Tom advanced on them, his voice low and dangerous. Like your men were reasonable with my daughter? She shouldn't have been here. Eleanor blurted. It's not our fault. She continued, but Tom wasn't listening. His backhanded slaps sent her sprawling onto the couch, holding her face in shock. Don't you dare, Tom growled. Don't you dare blame her. Rick tried to inch toward the door, but Tom was faster. He grabbed Rick by the throat and slammed him against the wall. Rick's feet dangled in the air as his face turned red. Please, Rick wheezed, his voice barely audible. We can talk about this. Talk? Tom tightened his grip. Like your men talk to Ava? With their fists? Tom's knee slammed into Rick's stomach before he let him drop. As Rick gasped for air, Tom's boot found its mark, once. Twice. 3 times. Stop. Eleanor screamed. You'll kill him. No. Tom's voice was chillingly calm. I won't. Not yet. Tom grabbed Rick by the hair, jerking his head up. Your men hurt my little girl. Think I'll return the favor. What followed was methodical, brutal, and precise. Tom knew exactly how much damage the human body could endure. He kept Rick conscious, ensuring he felt every blow. When it was over, Rick was curled on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Blood dripped from his nose and lips, pooling on the carpet Tom had installed just last summer. Tom turned to Eleanor. She had pressed herself into the couch, her body trembling. Tommy, please, she whimpered. I can explain. Don't call me that. Tom looked at her like she was a stranger. Get your things. Get out. If you're still here in 10 minutes, you'll wish you weren't. Eleanor staggered to her feet, a weak protest escaping her lips. Where am I supposed to go? Ask your brother. Tom's laugh was humorless. Once he can talk again. He turned to the bodyguards, one still unconscious, the other clutching his throat. Take your boss and get out. If I ever see any of you again, they won't find your bodies. The conscious guard struggled to his feet, helping his partner up. Together, they lifted Rick, who moaned in pain. This isn't over. Rick mumbled through bloody lips. Tom smiled coldly, and both guards instinctively took a step back. It's just beginning. Tom watched as they loaded Rick into one of the SUVs, Eleanor stumbling after them, mascara streaking her cheeks. She looked back once, but Tom had already turned away. Inside, the house felt foreign to him. Broken glass, blood on his carpet, cigarette burns on his coffee table. The home he had built, now defiled by their presence. His phone buzzed again. A text from Mac found something. Meet me tonight. Tom nodded to himself. Eleanor and Rick thought this was over. They thought he had gotten his revenge, spent his rage. They were wrong. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. For Ava. For every holiday dinner where Rick had sat at his table, smiling while plotting to destroy his family. Tom walked into the bedroom, their bedroom. The bed where she'd betrayed him still carried the evidence of their affair. He stripped the sheets methodically, carried them to the backyard, and set them on fire. Then he made a series of calls. To his bank. To his lawyer. to Detective Ramirez. Eleanor thought she knew him. Thought he was predictable, boring, safe. She was about to learn how wrong she was. They all were. Chapter 3: The Backstories. In the quiet aftermath of violence, Tom sat in his chair, staring at the blank television screen. The house felt hollow. Tainted. Blood still stained his knuckles. Rick's blood. His phone buzzed again. It was Mac. Construction site. 1 hour. Tom closed his eyes, memories rushing back. Afghanistan, 2003. The ambush that nearly killed them both. Mac pulling him to safety as bullets flew. The debt between them written in blood and gunfire. Tom hadn't always been this man, capable of cold violence, of calculated revenge. Once, he had been a small-town kid with simple dreams. Military service had changed him. It had taught him about duty, loyalty, and the harsh realities of a world where violence solved problems words couldn't touch. The day he met Eleanor replayed in his mind. She had been a waitress at the local diner, all bright smiles and endless chatter. He'd been freshly discharged, still adjusting to civilian life. She'd seemed like an anchor, something real to hold on to while his mind still echoed with gunfire and screams. Their courtship had been swift, passionate. She talked about her dreams, a big house, fancy cars, the kind of life her brother Rick had. Tom had promised to give her everything he could. Not riches, but stability. Security. A home. For years it had seemed enough. They had Ava. Bought this house. Built a life. Tom had worked his way up from laborer to foreman, taking pride in honest work. Eleanor had seemed happy, or at least he thought she was. Now, he wondered how long the lies had been festering. How long had she looked at his calloused hands and worn boots with contempt? How long had she been plotting with Rick, laughing at the faithful husband who trusted her? Rick. Tom's hands clenched at the thought of his brother-in-law, the golden boy of the family, with his designer suits and smooth talk. Tom had never trusted him. He'd always sensed the predator beneath the polished exterior. But for Eleanor's sake, Tom had welcomed Rick into his home, broken bread with him, endured his subtle jabs and condescending smiles. Tom's phone rang. Detective Ramirez. Walker. Tom answered. Got some information on your brother-in-law, Ramirez said without preamble. You're not going to like it. Tell me. Those weren't just bodyguards at your house. They're enforcers. Enforcers? Rick's been running a protection racket. Squeezing local businesses. He's got cops on the payroll, judges in his pocket. Tom processed the news, his mind already racing. This was bigger than he had thought. That explains the muscle, Tom muttered. There's more, Ramirez continued. Your wife's been making withdrawals. Big ones. Moving money into offshore accounts. How long? 6 months at least. Tom's mind raced. Walker. Ramirez hesitated before speaking again. They were planning to clean you out. Divorce papers are already drawn up. They were going to take everything, leave you with nothing but debt. Tom's laugh was harsh, almost hollow. Appreciate the intel, Detective. Walker. Ramirez's voice sharpened. Don't do anything stupid. Rick's connected. He's dangerous. So am I. Tom ended the call. He stood, his movements steady and purposeful as he walked through the house. In the bedroom, he opened the closet, pushing aside clothes. Behind a false panel, hidden away, was the safe, a secret space Eleanor had never discovered. Inside, remnants of his military life, documents, medals, and a book of contacts from his service days. Men who owed him favors. Men who knew how to handle problems, quietly. The construction site was dark when he arrived. Mac's truck sat parked in the shadows, out of sight from the streetlights. Tom approached cautiously, his senses on alert, scanning for any surveillance. Old habits died hard. Mac stood by a stack of steel beams, his large frame silhouetted against the night sky. Despite 20 years in civilian life, he still moved like a soldier, alert, ready. You look like hell, Mac said, as Tom approached. You should see the other guy. Mac nodded toward his truck. Got something to show you. Inside, he pulled out a laptop and turned it toward Tom. Been doing some digging on Rick's operations. Man's got his fingers in everything: real estate fraud, protection rackets, money laundering. But here's the interesting part. Mac clicked through to a series of documents: bank statements, property records, shell companies. Tom's jaw tightened when he saw it. His wife's name kept popping up. She's been working with Rick for years, helping him move money around. Mac's voice dropped lower. She's not just his lover. She's his partner. Tom's gaze darkened as he studied the documents. He felt like he had been sucker punched. She played me for a fool, he said, his voice flat. There's more, Mac said. Rick's got problems. He borrowed big from some dangerous people. Word is, he's desperate for cash. That's probably why they accelerated their timeline with you. Timeline? Mac pulled up more documents. They'd been planning this for months. The divorce, the asset transfers, everything. They were going to bleed you dry, saddle you with Rick's debts. You'd have lost everything. The house, your savings, maybe even end up in jail for their financial schemes. Tom absorbed the information, his mind working through it in silence. The betrayal had gone deeper than he thought. Not just an affair, but a calculated plot to destroy him. What about Ava? He asked, his voice low, the worry sharp. She wasn't supposed to be home today, Mac answered, grimacing. They got sloppy. Got caught. Rick's guys panicked. Tom's jaw clenched, his anger building. They hurt my little girl. And they'll pay for that. Mac nodded. But you need to be smart about this. Rick's got connections. You go after him head on. You'll end up dead or in prison. Mac finished for him, his voice serious. I'm not going to kill him, Tom said, his tone icy. Death's too quick, too clean. I want them to suffer. I want them to lose everything, just like they planned for me. Mac studied his old friend's face. You've got a plan? Getting there. Tom stood up, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. I need you to keep digging. Bank records. Business dealings. Everything. I want to know every skeleton in their closet. What about Eleanor? Mac asked, his gaze steady. Tom's expression turned cold. She made her choice. Now she lives with it. Tom left Mac and drove home, his mind already working through the next steps. The house felt different now, like a crime scene, not a home. He walked through each room, noting the small signs he'd missed before. The extra phone she'd hidden in her jewelry box. The financial documents tucked behind the filing cabinet. The business cards from offshore banks. All the pieces of their betrayal, hidden in plain sight. In Ava's room, he paused. Photos covered the walls, family vacations, birthdays, graduations. Eleanor smiling, playing the devoted mother, all while plotting to destroy their lives. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. When can you pick me up? Tom quickly replied, tomorrow morning? Get some rest. Then another text came in. This one from Eleanor. We need to talk. Tom deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say. He spent the night in his chair cleaning his gun, making lists, planning. Eleanor and Rick thought they knew him, the predictable, reliable Thomas Walker. The man who played by the rules. They had no idea what he was capable of. As dawn broke, Tom made coffee. Properly this time. No burning. He had lived through betrayal before. In war. Tom had seen what betrayal could do to men. But this was different. This wasn't combat. This was family. They'd brought war to his home. They'd threatened his child. Now they would learn what that meant. The sun rose over his broken home, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. Thomas Walker. Husband. Father. Builder of homes. Was gone. In his place stood a warrior. Awakened from a long slumber. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. The war had begun. Chapter 4. The hospital visit. Tom strode through the sterile hospital corridors, his boots echoing against the linoleum floor. The nurse at the station gave him a brief nod. They were used to him by now. Through the window of Ava's room, he saw her lying in bed, her bruised face turned toward the TV mounted on the wall. "Hey, baby girl," he said softly, stepping into the room. Ava's eyes lit up despite the pain. "Dad?" Her voice was stronger than it had been, but there was still an edge of pain to her words. Tom settled into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand gently in his. The bruises on her face had darkened, tracking the passage of time since Rick's men had attacked her. His jaw clenched at the sight. "The doctor says I can go home tomorrow," Ava said, her voice still weak. "Not home," Tom replied, his tone firm. "I've arranged for you to stay with Sarah for a while." "But Dad—" "No arguments," he interrupted, his voice gentle but unyielding. "Home isn't safe right now. I need to handle some things." Ava's fingers tightened around his. "Mom called me." Tom's expression hardened. "What did she say?" "She tried to explain. Said it wasn't what I thought." "That Uncle Rick." Ava's voice cracked. "She said I shouldn't have been there. That it was my fault for coming home early." Tom stood abruptly, pacing to control his rage. "Nothing about this is your fault. Nothing. I should have known something was wrong." Ava continued, her voice quiet but heavy with regret. "The way they'd whisper when you weren't around. How Uncle Rick started showing up more often when you were at work." She wiped at her eyes, trying to clear the tears. "Mom's been meeting with lawyers. I saw the paperwork in her car last week. I should have told you." Tom knelt beside her bed again, his expression softening. "You trusted your mother. That's not a crime. Tell me everything you remember," he said, his voice steady. "When did Rick start coming around more?" As Ava spoke, Tom's mind moved swiftly, cataloging details, building a timeline of betrayal, Eleanor's late-night real estate meetings, Rick's casual drop-ins when Tom was at the construction site, the whispered phone calls, the hidden documents. A knock at the door interrupted them. Max stood in the doorway, his hospital administrator badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Got a minute?" he asked. Tom squeezed Ava's hand. "Get some rest. I'll be back soon." In the hallway, Mac pulled him aside. "Those guys you roughed up? They're not just muscle for hire." Tom's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "They're connected," Mac continued, glancing around before speaking in a lower voice. "One of them worked security for a casino downtown. Lots of mob ties. The other's got a rap sheet a mile long: assault, extortion, attempted murder." Tom absorbed this quietly, his mind processing. "Rick's deeper in than I thought." "That's not all," Mac added. "Been asking around about your brother-in-law. He's got protection from someone high up. Judges, cops, people making sure he stays clean." "Can you get me names?" Tom asked, his voice sharp. Mac nodded. "Working on it. But watch your back, Walker. These aren't amateurs." Tom's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. It was a message from Detective Ramirez. He nodded to Mac. "Keep digging. I need everything you can find." Back in Ava's room, he found her dozing. The medication had made her more tired, which was probably for the best. She didn't need to see what was coming. A nurse entered with fresh bandages. "Mr. Walker? We need to document her injuries again for the police report." Tom watched as they photographed each bruise, each scrape. Evidence. Ammunition. His daughter's pain, catalogued in megapixels. The detective handling her case called. The nurse said, "They want to interview her tomorrow." "No," Tom said, his voice firm. "She's been through enough. They can talk to me," he added. The nurse hesitated. "Sir, in cases of domestic violence." "This isn't domestic violence," Tom cut her off. "This is something else entirely. And I'm handling it." Later, as night settled over the hospital, Tom sat by Ava's side, watching her sleep. His phone lit up with texts from Eleanor. Please, explanations, threats. He deleted them all. The woman he had married, the mother of his child, was gone. In her place stood a stranger who'd conspired to destroy him, who had watched their daughter be attacked and done nothing. Tom's fingers traced the military ID he still carried in his wallet. 20 years ago, he'd been a different man, a soldier who knew how to deal with enemies. Tom had understood for a long time that sometimes, violence was the only language people truly respected. He'd buried that man when he came home, built a life of peace. But now, watching his daughter's bruised face, he felt the soldiers stirring. Rising. Ready for war. Eleanor. Rick. They're thugs. They brought violence into his home, hurt his child, and tried to take everything from him. Now they were about to learn that Thomas Walker hadn't forgotten how to fight. Chapter 5: The Investigation. The police station buzzed with activity as Tom made his way to Detective Ramirez's desk. Izzy, Ramirez was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, with eyes that missed nothing. She motioned for him to sit. "You look like hell," she said, observing him. "Been a rough few days," Tom replied, his voice tight. Izzy pulled out a thick file and spread photos across her desk. "Got some information you need to see. Your wife's been busy." She pointed to a man in his 30s, standing in front of a sleek car. "That's Julian Torres. Con artist. Specializes in real estate fraud. He's been on our radar for years, but nothing ever sticks." Tom studied the photos. "What's the connection?" "Torres helps people hide money," Izzy explained. "Sets up shell companies, offshore accounts. He's good at it. We've never been able to prove anything, though." She slid over more documents. 3 weeks ago, Eleanor transferred most of your joint savings into an account we can't trace. The paperwork looked legitimate. Your signature was on everything." "I never signed anything," Tom snapped. "Yeah, but someone did. Someone good enough to fool the bank." Izzy pulled out more files. "Your brother-in-law's businesses? Their fronts. Money laundering. Probably drugs. Those bodyguards who hurt your daughter. They work for the Castellano family." The name hit Tom like a physical blow. The Castellanos controlled most of the city's organized crime. If Rick was involved with them. "You need to back off," Izzy warned. "These people don't play games. They'll kill you and never think twice." Tom's laugh was harsh, almost bitter. "They already tried to destroy me. Hurt my daughter. You expect me to walk away?" "I expect you to be smart," Izzy said, her voice low. "Look, I can't officially help you. But unofficially." She slid a USB drive across the desk. "This contains everything we have on Torres, Rick, and their operations. Account numbers. Business records. Surveillance reports. Just be careful how you use it." Tom pocketed the drive. "I owe you?" "Yeah, you do." She caught his arm as he stood. "And Tom, whatever you're planning, make sure I don't have to arrest you for it." From the police station, Tom drove to his bank. The manager's face was sympathetic as she reviewed his accounts. "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. The transfers were all properly authorized. Your wife had power of attorney. Show me everything she moved." "Where it went?" Tom demanded. The manager pulled up transaction records. Tom's jaw clenched as he saw their savings disappear. College funds, retirement accounts, all gone. Eleanor had been thorough. His phone buzzed. It was Max, sending coordinates for a meeting. Tom found Max in the hospital parking garage, smoking despite the regulations. "Got those names you wanted," Max said. "Who?" "Judge Michael Preston's been handling all the cases involving Rick's businesses. Dismissing charges. Sealing records. The Castellanos own him." "What about the bodyguards?" "Vincent Caruso and Tony Battaglia. Career criminals. Caruso's still in ICU. You did a number on him. Battaglia was released this morning." Tom nodded. "Where does he live?" Max's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Need to ask him some questions." Max sighed. These guys are professionals, Tom. They'll kill you. They can try, Tom said coldly. Max handed him a piece of paper. Your funeral. Tom's next stop was his house. Eleanor had cleared out most of her things, but he wasn't interested in clothes or jewelry. He went straight to her home office, the one place she'd never let him organize. The filing cabinets yielded a treasure trove: bank statements, correspondence, records of meetings. Eleanor had documented everything, probably to protect herself. Now, her own paranoia would help destroy her. In a hidden folder, he found photos of Eleanor with Rick in intimate situations. Blackmail insurance, Tom realized. She'd been playing everyone, even her partner in crime. His phone rang. Eleanor's number. He almost deleted it. Then he reconsidered. It was time to start playing his own game. He answered the call. Yes? Tommy, please. Eleanor's voice trembled through the line. We need to talk. This isn't what you think. No. Tom's voice was calm, almost conversational. So you didn't steal my money? Didn't stand by while Rick's men threw our daughter down the stairs? I didn't know they would hurt her. Rick promised. Tom interrupted. Rick promised what? That he'd help you bleed me dry? Set me up for his crimes? Silence on the other end. How did you know about? I know everything, Eleanor. About Julian Torres. About the Castellanos. About Judge Preston. He let that sink in. You really should have been more careful with your paperwork. Tom, please. Her voice was desperate now. You don't understand what you're dealing with. These people. No. Tom cut her off. You don't understand. You brought these people into my home. Let them hurt my child. Now you get to watch while I tear their whole world down. They'll kill you, she whispered. Better men than them have tried. Tom ended the call. His laptop powered up, and he inserted Izzy's USB drive. Hours of surveillance footage. Financial records. Police reports. Everything he needed to understand the operations of his enemies. A separate file contained information on Julian Torres' past victims, people he'd conned, lives he'd destroyed. Tom started taking notes. These people wanted revenge. They just needed someone to show them how to get it. As night fell, Tom cleaned his gun. It was an old habit, one that helped him think. Eleanor and Rick thought they were dealing with a simple construction foreman, a predictable man who played by the rules. They'd forgotten, or maybe never knew, what he'd been before. The things he'd done in service to his country. The skills he'd learned and never quite forgotten. Tom smiled in the darkness. Time to remind them. Chapter 6: The Plan. The bar was nearly empty when Tom arrived. Mac was sitting in a corner booth, files spread across the table with a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him. 2 decades of hospital administration hadn't softened his military bearing. Those the hospital reports? Tom asked, sliding into the booth. Mac pushed them over. Caruso's got 3 broken ribs, a fractured larynx. Possible permanent knee damage. Battaglia's not much better, broken jaw, dislocated shoulder, concussion. They'll live. Yeah. Tom grinned, though there was no joy in it. You starting a war here, Tom? They started it. I'm just finishing it. Mac pulled out more papers, laying them across the table. Got the background checks you wanted. Torres has been working with Rick for about 2 years. They run a pretty sophisticated operation. They find desperate people. Offer them fake investment opportunities, drain them dry. Your wife helped set up the companies. Handled the paperwork. How many victims? At least 20 that we know of. Most lost everything. Max slid a list of names and addresses across the table. What are you planning? Tom pocketed the list. Better if you don't know. Mac's gaze hardened. These people you're dealing with, they're not amateurs. The Castellanos don't play games. Neither do I. Tom's voice was flat. Not anymore. His phone buzzed. It was Detective Ramirez, requesting another meeting. Tom finished his drink and stood. Watch your back. Mac warned. Always do, Tom replied. He met Izzy in the police station parking lot, leaning against her car. She handed him a file. Got something you need to see, she said. Tom flipped through the file. Judge Preston's been making regular deposits to an offshore account. Big ones. Way more than his salary could explain. This is what they used to buy him? Tom asked, his jaw tightening. Looks like it. But that's not all. Izzy pulled out more photos. Preston's got a weakness for young prostitutes. Rick's people have been providing them, along with cocaine. They own him completely. Tom absorbed the information, his mind racing. This was bigger than he thought. Izzy grabbed his arm as he stood. Don't do anything stupid. These people, they have protection. Money. Power. Tom smiled coldly. But they've never dealt with someone like me. Back home, Tom spread everything across his dining room table. Surveillance photos. Financial records. Witness statements. The pieces of a puzzle were finally coming together. Rick's operation was far more extensive than Tom had imagined. Real estate fraud was just the surface. Beneath that lay layers of money laundering, drug trafficking, and prostitution, all protected by corrupt officials and mob connections. Eleanor had known. She had to have known. Yet she'd chosen to side with them. Chosen to help them destroy him. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Back off while you can. Last warning. Tom saved the number. It was useful to know they were worried enough to send a threat. He began jotting down notes, mapping out connections and weaknesses. Rick's operation thrived on maintaining a perfect facade, on keeping the victims silent, making everything seem legitimate. But what happened when that facade started to crack? Judge Preston was the weak link. If he went down, the entire protection scheme would fall apart. Tom looked at the list Mac had given him. Torres victims. People who'd lost everything. Homes. Savings. Businesses. People with nothing left to lose. It was time to give them a chance at revenge. He opened up his laptop and accessed templates for business letters and corporate documents. Within hours, he'd crafted invitations to a private meeting, offering an opportunity to recover their lost investments. Anonymous tips revealing where their money had truly gone. Seeds of destruction. Ready to grow. Next, he reviewed the surveillance footage Izzy had provided. Judge Preston leaving brothels. Preston meeting with known drug dealers. Preston accepting envelopes of cash from Rick's associates. Tom burned 3 copies to separate drives. One for the media. One for the bar association. One for Preston himself. His phone buzzed again. Ava. Dad? When can I come home? Not yet, baby. Soon. He kept his voice calm. How are you feeling? Better. Sarah's parents have been really nice. A pause. Mom keeps calling. Don't answer. I wasn't going to. Ava responded, her voice hardening. I saw what they did to you. What they tried to take from us. Tom's voice softened. None of that matters. You're what matters. Just be careful, okay? I can't lose you too. You won't. Tom's resolve strengthened as he ended the call. He got back to his work, laying out the final pieces. Judge Preston's corruption. Torres victims. The Castellanos' criminal empire. Everything was connected. Everything was vulnerable. Pull the right threads, and the whole thing would fall apart. His phone lit up. Eleanor. This time, he answered. Last chance, he said before she could speak. Tell me where the money is. I can't. Her voice was shaking. They'll kill me. Then you'd better hope they get to you before I do. He ended the call. The soldier in him knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was warfare. Intelligence gathering. Target assessment. Strategic strikes. Eleanor. Rick. Torres. The Castellanos. They were about to learn what happened when you pushed a trained killer too far. When you hurt his family. Tom smiled in the darkness. The storm was gathering. And it was time to let it break. Chapter 7: The Trap. Tom sat in his truck, parked outside Julian Torres' office building, watching through binoculars as the conman's victims arrived. 20 people. Each one carrying manila folders filled with evidence of his fraud. Tom had contacted them all, provided proof of Torres' schemes, and given them a chance to strike back. His phone buzzed. A text from Izzy. Judge Preston just signed the warrants. Move when ready. Tom checked his watch. In 30 minutes, Preston would realize his mistake, signing search warrants for properties owned by his Castellano family benefactors. By then, it would be too late. Inside the building's lobby, the victims gathered, anger radiating from their faces. A banker who'd lost his pension. A widow whose house had been stolen through forged documents. A contractor driven to bankruptcy. All of them waiting for Torres. Tom's burner phone rang. It was Danny Lee. The transfers are done, Danny said. Rick's accounts are empty. Everything's moved to the shell companies. What about the offshore accounts? Those too. Eleanor's nest egg is gone. They're both broke, Tom said. Send the evidence to the IRS. Anonymous tip. Already done. You sure about this? Danny's voice was cautious. The Castellanos will. Let me worry about them. Tom cut him off. He ended the call. A black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Torres had arrived. Tom watched through his binoculars as the conman stepped out, adjusting his expensive suit. Torres didn't notice the gathering crowd yet. He was too busy checking his reflection in the car window. Tom pulled out his phone and dialed the number he'd gotten from Mac. Mr. Torres? Tom said, his voice smooth and professional. This is David Chun from the SEC. We've received some concerning reports about your investment practices. I'm in your lobby with some former clients who'd like to discuss the matter. Tom could see the exact moment Torres realized what was happening. The conman's confident facade cracked, replaced by pure fear. Tom smiled, dialing another number. The local news station? This is an anonymous tip. You might want to send a crew to 1835 Market Street. A group of fraud victims is about to confront the man who stole their life savings. Torres tried to make a break for it, retreating toward his car, but the crowd had already spotted him. They surged forward, waving documents and shouting accusations. News vans skidded into the parking lot, cameras already rolling. Tom's phone buzzed, Rick calling. He let it go to voicemail, then checked the message. You bastard. What did you do? The IRS is here. They're seizing everything. I'll kill you for this. Then came another call, this time from Eleanor. Her voice was full of panic. Tom, please. They're saying it was all fraud. That Rick was laundering money. They're freezing my accounts. I need help. Tom deleted the message without responding. Through the binoculars, he watched Torres struggle to push through the crowd, his designer suit now wrinkled and torn. Camera crews captured every moment as the victims shared their stories. Decades of fraud laid bare in the harsh light of day. Police cars arrived, lights flashing. Tom spotted Izzy stepping out of an unmarked vehicle, warrant in hand. She timed it perfectly. Torres was caught on camera, surrounded by his victims, as federal agents moved in to arrest him. Tom's burner phone buzzed. It was Danny. Files sent to the SEC. Torres' entire operation exposed. Rick's connection to the fraud documented. They'll both go down for this, Tom said, his mind already working through the next steps. The plan was going off without a hitch. Torres would talk to save himself, implicating Rick in the fraud. Rick would panic and probably try to flee. The Castellanos would realize he'd become a liability. Tom started his truck, pulling away from the scene. One target down, 2 to go. His next stop was the construction site. He'd arranged to meet Betrayal, the bodyguard who'd helped throw Ava down the stairs. Betrayal had agreed to talk, thinking Tom was interested in negotiating peace. Tom parked behind the half-finished building and double-checked his recording equipment. Everything Betrayal said would be captured, documented, and preserved as evidence against Rick and his criminal network. He wasn't about to leave anything to chance. Betrayal arrived right on time, alone as instructed. His face still bore the bruises from their last encounter. "Make this quick," Betrayal growled. "I'm not supposed to be here." Tom stepped from the shadows. "Tell me about Rick's operation. The money laundering. The protection rackets. All of it." Betrayal's face hardened. "I'm not saying anything." Tom pulled out his phone and played a recording. Betrayal talking about drug shipments, naming names, detailing criminal operations. Betrayal's face went pale. "How did you?" he stammered. "Your partner Caruso talks in his sleep. Hospital rooms have surprisingly thin walls." Tom's voice hardened. "Start talking. Or this goes to the feds. And the Castellanos." Betrayal started talking. For the next hour, he spilled everything: Rick's crimes, his connections to organized crime, the complex web of corruption he'd helped build. Tom recorded every word. When Betrayal finished, Tom handed him an envelope. "Plane ticket to Miami. Cash for a fresh start. Disappear." Betrayal grabbed the envelope with trembling hands and fled. Tom sent copies of the recording to multiple secure locations as insurance in case anything happened to him. His phone buzzed again. Max sending coordinates. Time for the next phase. Rick would be freaking out now, watching his empire crumble. Eleanor would be desperate. Her stolen money vanished into untraceable accounts. Both of them would be making mistakes, running scared. Tom smiled in the darkness. The trap was set. Now came the fun part, watching them destroy themselves in their attempts to escape it. Chapter 8: The Confrontation. The warehouse district was eerily silent at this hour, save for the distant rumble of freight trains. Tom parked his truck behind an abandoned loading dock and checked his weapons. The Glock was clean and loaded. The backup piece strapped to his ankle. Not that he planned to need them. His phone lit up with texts. "Danny. Rick just tried accessing the accounts. They're all empty. He's freaking out. Mac. Castellano enforcers spotted at Rick's office. They don't look happy. Izzy. Preston singing like a bird. Naming names. Dates. Everything. The whole operation's exposed." Tom deleted the messages and stepped into the night. The warehouse ahead had been Rick's primary money laundering front, wholesale electronics, a business that never seemed to ship anything of value. Now, it would become the stage for Rick's downfall. Thanks to Danny's hacking skills, the security cameras had already been disabled. Tom moved through the shadows, counting his heartbeats. Right on schedule, a black SUV pulled up to the loading dock. Rick stumbled out, clutching a briefcase. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face pale with fear. 2 Castellano soldiers flanked him, their expressions grim. "The money's here." Rick's voice cracked. "All of it. Just let me explain." The larger soldier grabbed the briefcase and checked inside. "It's empty." "What?" "No, that's impossible." Rick stammered, his eyes darting around. "It was just here. Someone must have. You lost 10 million of the family's money." The second soldier growled. "Mr. Castellano wants answers." Tom stepped into view, enjoying Rick's terror. "Looking for this?" He held up a USB drive, bank records, transfer histories, proof of where all that money really went. "You," Tom added. Rick lunged forward, but the soldiers held him back. "This is your fault," Rick hissed. "No, Rick. This is your fault. You got greedy. Sloppy." Tom's tone was casual, almost amused. "Did you really think you could steal from the mob and get away with it?" "I didn't steal anything. It was business." "Really?" Tom turned to the soldiers. "Check his offshore accounts. The ones he thought were secret. He's been skimming for years, playing both sides." The larger soldier's phone buzzed. He checked it and nodded to his partner. "Boss says it's true." Rick's face went ghost white. "No, wait. I can explain." "The boss doesn't want explanations," the soldier said, his hand moving to his weapon. "He wants his money. I'll get it back." I just need time. Time's up, Rick. Tom's smile was cold. The feds are closing in. The judge is talking. Your whole operation's exposed. The Castellanos can't risk keeping you alive. Please, Rick pleaded, turning to the soldiers. I've got dirt on everyone. Names. Dates. Recordings. The soldier's gun appeared. Tom stepped back into the shadows. Goodbye, Rick. Say hello to your friends in hell. Rick's screams echoed through the warehouse, followed by 2 shots muffled by suppressors. Then silence. Tom waited until the SUV pulled away, then made an anonymous call to the police. They'd find Rick's body, assume it was a mob hit. Case closed. His phone buzzed, Eleanor again. This time, he answered. It's over, he said before she could speak. Rick's dead. Torres is in custody. The money's gone. Tom, please. Her voice was shaking with tears. I never meant for any of this. Save your lies? He snapped. I'm done listening. What am I supposed to do? I have nothing left. You've got exactly what you deserve. His voice was ice cold. You chose this path. Now walk it alone. He ended the call and drove to the motel where Eleanor was hiding. She opened the door when he knocked. Her designer clothes had been replaced by cheap department store wear, and her makeup was smeared from crying. Come to gloat? She spat. Come to deliver your divorce papers? Tom handed her an envelope containing proof of her involvement in Rick's crimes. Try anything, he warned, and this goes to the feds. You'll join your brother in hell. You can't prove anything. She sneered. Wanna bet? Tom's smile was terrible. I've got recordings. Bank records. Witness statements. Everything. Eleanor's shoulders slumped. What do you want? Sign the papers. Disappear. Never contact me or Ava again. And if I don't? Then I destroy you completely. Your choice. She signed. Tom left her there, sobbing in her cheap motel room, her dreams of wealth and power shattered. His phone buzzed, Izzy with updates. The investigation was proceeding exactly as planned. Rick's death would be ruled a mob hit. Torres was cooperating, implicating everyone. The Castellanos were turning on each other. Their empire was crumbling. Tom drove home, satisfaction warming his chest. They'd tried to destroy him. Hurt his daughter. Steal everything he'd built. Instead, he'd annihilated them completely. Chapter 9: The Aftermath. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Tom made coffee. Properly this time, no burning. The headline on the morning paper screamed, Major crime ring exposed. Below that, prominent businessman found dead in warehouse. His phone buzzed. Mac checking in? It's all over the news. Mac said. Rick's murder. Torres arrest. The whole operation exposed. You sure about this? It's done, Tom replied, sipping his coffee. The Castellanos think Rick stole their money. The feds think it was a mob hit. Case closed. And Eleanor? Broke. Alone. Running scared. She signed the papers this morning. Good. Mac paused. Ava okay? Getting there. She's coming home today. After hanging up, Tom reviewed the morning's reports. Danny had erased all traces of their cyber operations. Izzy had sealed the case files, marking Rick's murder as solved, organized crime. The Castellanos were too busy with federal investigations to bother with revenge. His doorbell rang. Ava had returned from Sarah's house. She looked better. Her bruises were fading, and her smile was genuine. Hey, Dad. Tom hugged her gently. Welcome home, baby girl. I saw the news, she said, studying his face. Did you? Better if you don't ask questions you don't want answered. Ava nodded. Mom called me, she said. What did she say? Begged me to help her. Said she was sorry. That she had nowhere to go. Ava's voice hardened. I told her she should have thought about that before betraying us. Pride swelled in Tom's chest. His daughter was strong. Like him. Unforgiving of betrayal. His phone buzzed. Detective Ramirez. Just wanted you to know, Izzy said. Torres rolled on everyone. Judge Preston's going away for decades. The whole corruption ring is exposed. Appreciate the update, Tom said. Her voice softened. It's over. Let it go now. He ended the call and joined Ava in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, humming softly. What now? She asked. Now we rebuild. Together. Later, alone in his study, Tom reviewed the final pieces of his revenge. The offshore accounts where he'd hidden Rick's stolen millions, insurance against future threats. The files documenting Eleanor's crimes, ready to destroy her if she ever returned. The network of allies he'd built, Mac, Danny, Izzy, loyal friends who understood the importance of justice. His phone buzzed one last time, an unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Walker? A cultured voice. Probably Castellano himself. I want to thank you for exposing Rick's theft. The family appreciates your discretion. Just wanted justice. Indeed. Consider yourself under our protection. No one will trouble you or your daughter again. Tom smiled. Appreciate that. He ended the call and deleted the number. Everything had worked perfectly. His enemies destroyed. His daughter safe. His future secure. The soldier in him recognized a complete victory. The doorbell rang, Mac, Danny, and Izzy, arriving for dinner. His new family. Forged in battle. Tempered by loyalty. Tom joined them, accepting their congratulations, their concern, their friendship. He was no longer the naive man who trusted too easily. He'd become something harder. Colder. More dangerous. But watching Ava laugh with their friends, seeing her heal from the betrayal, he knew it had been worth it. He'd protected what mattered. Destroyed those who'd threatened his family. The war was over. He'd won. And God help anyone who ever tried to hurt them again. Epilogue. 5 years later, the construction company's new headquarters stood proudly against the city skyline. Walker and Associates Construction was displayed in bold letters across the glass facade. Inside his top-floor office, Thomas Walker reviewed the quarterly reports with the same intensity he once used to plan military operations. At 50, his hair had more gray than dark now, but his blue eyes retained their piercing focus. His body remained combat-ready through disciplined training. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Walker? Your daughter's here. Send her in. Ava strode into the office, now 26 and carrying herself with confident grace. Her law degree hung on Tom's office wall, paid for with Rick's stolen millions, a fact that always made him smile. She'd specialized in prosecuting financial crimes, turning their family's tragedy into a weapon against others like Julian Torres. Ready for lunch, Dad? She asked, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Always, Tom replied. How's the Martinez case going? Another wannabe Julian Torres, Ava said, her smile sharp. He thought he could run a real estate scam targeting elderly veterans. Bad choice. The judge granted all our motions this morning. He's looking at 20 years minimum. They took the elevator down to the parking garage, where Tom's new truck waited. Still practical, but now top of the line. Some habits died hard. Heard from Mac this morning, Tom said as they drove. The hospital's naming him chief of operations. Good. He deserves it. Ava checked her phone. Izzy's making deputy chief next month. Danny's cybersecurity firm just landed another government contract. Their friends had all prospered since Eleanor and Rick's downfall. Loyalty, Tom had learned, paid better dividends than betrayal. The restaurant was upscale but discreet, one of their regular spots. The maitre d' led them to their usual corner table, positioned so they could watch all entrances. Another habit that hadn't faded. Sarah's getting married next month, Ava said, glancing at Tom as they studied the menus. Asked me to be maid of honor. Tom nodded. Sarah had been Ava's rock during the darkest days, offering shelter and support. Her family had become extended family. Mom tried reaching out again, Ava said quietly. Tom's hand tightened on his water glass. When? Last week. Email from a new account, Ava said coldly. Wanted to explain her side now that she's found peace, or whatever. I blocked her. Tom nodded approval. Eleanor had tried several times over the years to reconnect. Each attempt had met with silence. She'd moved to Florida after the divorce, remarried some retiree, and tried to rebuild her life. Tom kept tabs on her through various channels, not out of sentiment, but strategy. Know your enemies, even defeated ones. Any word on Rick's old associates? Ava asked. The Castellanos are mostly legitimate now. The old man died last year. His son's running clean businesses. Tom had maintained a carefully neutral relationship with the crime family. Mutual respect. Mutual distance. Julian was still in prison, likely for another decade at least. Their meals arrived, steak for Tom, grilled salmon for Ava. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The company's expanding again, Tom said after a moment. Bought that development firm in Phoenix, the one Rick tried to steal from that widow? Ava's smile was vindictive. Nice touch. Tom returned the smile. The company's growth had been strategic and methodical. Each acquisition either strengthened their position or settled old scores. The millions he'd stolen from Rick had been seed money for an empire built on legitimate success. Detective Rodriguez called yesterday, Ava said. Remember that cold case they reopened? Rick's murder? Tom's face revealed nothing. Oh. Officially closed now. Ruled a mob hit. Case inactive. Ava met his eyes. No new leads. They'd never discussed Tom's exact role in Rick's death. Ava had never asked, understanding some questions were better left unvoiced. But she knew her father. Knew what he was capable of. Knew he'd do anything to protect family. After lunch, they walked to the park where Ava had played as a child. The old playground had been replaced by new equipment, funded by an anonymous donation from Walker and Associates. James proposed, Ava said suddenly. Tom turned to study his daughter. James Chun was a prosecutor Ava had met 2 years ago. Smart. Honest. Devoted to Ava. Tom had run extensive background checks, of course. The man was clean. What did you say? Said I needed to think. Ava sat on a bench. Hard to trust. You know? After what happened with Mom. James isn't Rick or Eleanor, Tom said carefully. He's proven himself. You approve? I approve of anyone who makes you happy and treats you right. Tom's voice hardened. And he knows what'll happen if he doesn't. Ava laughed. Yeah. He's terrified of you. In a healthy way, Tom said, a smile tugging at his lips. They watched children play for a while, parents hovering nearby. Normal lives. Normal concerns. Tom sometimes wondered what that was like. Izzy mentioned they found Eleanor's ex-boyfriend Julian's old storage unit, Ava said. Lots of documents. Could cause problems for some people. Already handled, Tom replied. Danny scrubbed anything sensitive. Far as anyone knows, it was empty. The company's cybersecurity division, run by Danny with military-grade protocols, had proven invaluable over the years. Information was power, and Tom believed in controlling both. His phone buzzed, Max sending their monthly security report. Another ritual born of past betrayals. Trust, but verify. Always. Sarah wants you to walk her down the aisle, Ava mentioned. Her dad's okay with sharing the honor. Tom felt a warmth in his chest. Family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was the people who stood by you in the darkness. They walked back to the office, passing the construction site for their newest project, a women's shelter being built in partnership with EZ's Domestic Violence Task Force. Another way of balancing the scales. Dinner tonight? Ava asked as they reached her car. James wants to talk to you. Properly. Tom nodded. Tell him to bring that bourbon he's been saving. And remind him I'm an excellent shot. Ava kissed his cheek. Love you, Dad. Try not to terrorize my boyfriend too much. No promises. Watching her drive away, Tom reflected on the years since Eleanor's betrayal. He'd rebuilt more than a business empire. He'd forged a new family, stronger than blood. Created a legacy built on loyalty instead of lies. Back in his office, Tom reviewed the day's reports: construction projects across 3 states, investment portfolios managed by trusted associates, and security briefings from Danny's team. A well-oiled machine, every part carefully controlled. Mac's weekly check-in arrived by encrypted email. Eleanor still in Florida. New husband's health failing. No suspicious activities. Julian denied parole again. No outside contacts. The Castellanos were running clean businesses. Territory stable. Judge Preston was dead in prison, of natural causes. Battaglia was still in witness protection, keeping his silence. Tom archived the report with 5 years of similar updates. The past never died, but it could be managed. Contained. Controlled. His phone rang. James Chun requesting a meeting before dinner. Probably wanting to do things properly. Ask permission. Old-fashioned. But Tom appreciated the gesture. Come by the office, he told James. We'll talk. The young prosecutor arrived promptly, suit pressed, manner respectful but not fearful. Good signs. Sir, I want to discuss Ava. Sit. Tom gestured to a chair. Let's talk about your intentions. 2 hours later, satisfaction settled in Tom's chest. James had proven himself again, honest about his feelings, clear about his plans, unafraid to stand his ground when challenged. A worthy partner for Ava. The engagement ring James showed him was elegant, not flashy. The prenup he proposed was fair. His background remained clean. His career trajectory solid. Most importantly, he understood what family meant. What loyalty required. I'll never hurt her, James promised. Never betray her trust. No, Tom agreed pleasantly. You won't. Because you know what happens to people who hurt my family. James met his eyes steadily. Yes, sir. I know exactly what happens. Tom smiled. The young man had done his research. Understood the warnings wrapped in Rick's unsolved murder. Eleanor's exile. Julian's downfall. Good. Welcome to the family, son. Now about that bourbon. Later that night, Tom stood at his office window, watching his city sparkle. His empire had been built on the ashes of betrayal, forged in the fires of revenge. But it had become something more, a fortress protecting those he loved. A legacy worthy of his daughter's inheritance. Eleanor and Rick had taught him valuable lessons about trust and betrayal. He'd learned them well. Built his new life on their bitter wisdom. Now he had everything they tried to steal: wealth, power, respect, and things they'd never understood: loyalty, family, honor. His phone buzzed with an alert from Danny's security team. Routine update. Nothing urgent. The world turned. Threats emerged and were contained. Life went on. But now he controlled the game instead of being played. Tom smiled in the darkness, remembering Eleanor's tears, Rick's terror, Julian's pleas for mercy. They thought him weak. Predictable. Easily destroyed. Their mistake. Nobody would make that mistake again. His new family, Ava, James, Mac, Izzy, Danny, even Sarah, understood what mattered. Loyalty above all. Honor among warriors. Protection for those who earned it. Destruction for those who betrayed it. The past was settled. The future secured. And Thomas Walker stood guard over both, unchanged in the ways that mattered. A protector. A warrior. A man who never forgave betrayal and never forgot his enemies. Let anyone who doubted that truth ask Eleanor, rotting in Florida exile. Ask Julian, growing old in prison. Ask Rick. Oh wait, they couldn't ask Rick anything. Not anymore. Tom's smile widened as he turned from the window. Time to head home. Prepare for dinner with his growing family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that loyalty mattered more than blood. The war was long over. He'd won it completely. Now he ruled the peace with the same iron will that had brought him victory. Just as it should be. Just as it would always be. After all, some things never changed. And Thomas Walker's dedication to protecting his family, punishing those who threatened it, would never change at all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen and I will see you there.